I never thought I'd be the kind of man who installs a hidden camera in his own home. I never thought I'd be the kind of man who pulls over on the side of a highway, hands shaking, watching something on his phone that makes his entire world go completely silent. But here I am, and I need to tell you what happened, because I'm still trying to make sense of it myself. My name doesn't matter. What matters is that for 11 months, I watched my wife fight for her life. And for 11 months, her brother came to our house almost every single week. I told myself he was just being a good brother. I told myself I was lucky to have family who showed up. I told myself a lot of things, right up until the moment I couldn't tell myself anything anymore. Her name is Diane, and before any of this, before the diagnosis, before the hospital visits, before the silence that started filling up our house like water rising in a closed room, she was the loudest person I had ever loved. I mean that in the best possible way. Diane laughed at everything. She laughed at bad jokes. She laughed at herself. She laughed at me when I burned toast or when I tried to fix things around the house and made them worse. She had this laugh that kind of curled up at the end, like it surprised even her. I fell in love with that laugh before I fell in love with anything else about her. We met at a mutual friend's birthday dinner. She was sitting across the table from me, and someone said something that wasn't even that funny, and she laughed so hard she knocked her water glass over. And instead of being embarrassed, she laughed even harder at that. I remember thinking, whoever ends up with this woman is going to have a good life. I didn't know yet that it would be me. We dated for 2 years, got married quietly, just close family and a few friends, at a small venue by the water. Nothing extravagant. We weren't extravagant people. We were comfortable people. We liked Sunday mornings and long drives and cooking dinner together even when the food didn't turn out right. We liked each other. Not just loved, liked. And I think that's rarer than people realize. We had been married for 6 years when she started getting tired. Not the normal kind of tired, not the kind that goes away after a good night's sleep. This was different. She'd wake up exhausted. She'd sit down in the middle of doing laundry and just stay there. She started losing weight without trying to. And Diane, who had never once complained about anything, started saying her joints ached, her back ached, everything ached. We went to the doctor, then another doctor, then a specialist, and then we sat in a beige office with bad lighting while a man in a white coat used words that I had to look up later because my brain stopped absorbing information the moment he said autoimmune and chronic in the same sentence. It wasn't cancer. I want to be clear about that because when people hear this story, they sometimes assume the worst. It wasn't cancer, but it was serious. It was the kind of illness that doesn't kill you quickly. It just slowly takes pieces of you. Her immune system had turned against her, her own body fighting itself. The cruelty of that still gets to me. Our life changed overnight. The woman who used to reorganize the kitchen cabinets for fun now needed help getting up from the couch some mornings. The woman who dragged me to farmers markets on weekends now spent most of her energy just getting through the day. She handled it with more grace than I ever could have. She didn't feel sorry for herself, but I felt sorry for both of us. And I felt scared in a way I never told her, because she had enough to carry already. I adjusted. You do when you love someone. I took on more around the house. I learned which medications she needed and when. I learned to read her face to know when she was pretending to feel okay and when she actually was. I became someone I didn't entirely recognize, more careful, more quiet, more watchful. The house became quieter too, less laughing. Not none, but less. And that's when Marcus started coming around more. Marcus is Diane's younger brother. He's 34, unmarried, works in logistics, something with supply chain management that I never fully understood even when he explained it. He and Diane had always been close, closer than she was with their older sister, closer than most siblings I knew. They had that easy shorthand that comes from growing up together, finishing each other's sentences, referencing things from childhood that I was never part of. I never had a problem with Marcus. I want to be honest about that. Before all of this, I liked him well enough. He was good company at family gatherings. He made Diane smile. He remembered her birthday without being reminded. He was one of those people who seems genuinely decent, the kind that makes you feel like the world isn't so bad. But about 2 months into Diane's illness, he started showing up at our house. Not for dinner, not for visits we'd planned together, just showing up. A Tuesday afternoon, a random Saturday morning, sometimes during the week when he knew I'd be at work. He'd text Diane, not me. She'd mention it casually afterward. "Marcus stopped by today," the way you'd mention the mail came or that it rained. At first I thought nothing of it. He was worried about his sister. That made sense. That was normal. If my sister were sick, I'd want to see her too. But the visits kept coming. Every week, sometimes twice a week, and something about the pattern started to feel off. Not dramatically off, not in a way I could point to and say, "Here, this is the thing that bothered me." Just a low, quiet hum of something I couldn't name. I came home early one Wednesday and his car was in the driveway. I walked in and they were sitting at the kitchen table with cups of tea, talking quietly. They both looked up when I came in. Diane smiled. Marcus said, "Hey," stood up, clapped me on the shoulder. Nothing happened. Nothing was happening. I felt almost embarrassed for noticing. But later that night, after Marcus had gone home and Diane was resting, I sat in the living room and I tried to figure out what it was that unsettled me. And I couldn't. It was like trying to grab smoke. Weeks went by. His visits continued. I started paying more attention. Little things. The way he'd arrive right around lunchtime when I was almost always at the office. The way Diane sometimes seemed quieter after he left. Not upset exactly, but like she'd used up something. The way she occasionally paused before answering when I asked what they talked about. "Just catching up," she'd say. "Family stuff, you know how he is." But I didn't know, really. That was the thing. I didn't know what they talked about for 2 and 3 hours at a time, and I had never had a reason to wonder before, and now I couldn't stop wondering. And then I noticed the drawer. We have a small table in the hallway, just inside the front door. It has a shallow drawer where we keep random things. Takeout menus, extra keys, a flashlight. I opened it one afternoon looking for a pen, and I noticed that things had been moved around. Not dramatically, just shuffled. Like someone had gone through it carefully and tried to put everything back the way it was, but hadn't quite managed it. I stood there in the hallway for a long time, looking at that drawer. I told myself I was being paranoid. I told myself I was under stress and looking for problems that didn't exist. I told myself that sick people's homes get visited by family, and family moves things around sometimes, and that doesn't mean anything. I told myself all of that. And then I drove to an electronics store and bought a small camera. I want to pause here for just a second because I know what you're thinking. And honestly, I thought the same thing about myself. What kind of husband does this? What kind of person installs a camera in his own home to watch his sick wife and her brother? I asked myself that question the entire drive home with the camera sitting on the passenger seat in a plastic bag. The answer I kept coming back to was a scared one. A man who didn't know what he was scared of, but felt it anyway. And I couldn't just feel it forever without doing something. I set the camera up on the bookshelf in the living room, small enough to miss if you weren't looking for it, angled toward the couch, the coffee table, the hallway that led to the kitchen and the bedroom. I told myself I'd check it once. I told myself if there was nothing to see, I'd take it down and never tell anyone about it and carry the embarrassment quietly, like a punishment I'd given myself. That was on a Thursday night. Marcus came over the following Tuesday. Before I get to what I saw, if this story is connecting with you in any way, if you've ever been in a place where you felt something was wrong but couldn't prove it, where you loved someone and feared what the truth might be, I'd ask you to hit the like button and subscribe if you haven't already. It doesn't cost anything, but it means these stories reach more people who might need to hear them. I really appreciate it. Now let me finish telling you what happened. I was driving back from a client meeting on Tuesday afternoon. It was about 2:30. The sun was doing that late autumn thing where it sits low and glaring in your windshield no matter which way you turn. I got an emotion alert on my phone from the camera app around noon, which meant someone had entered the living room. I hadn't watched it yet. I was in the meeting, then driving, and I kept thinking I'd wait until I got home. But I didn't wait. There's a stretch of highway about 20 minutes from our house where it opens up into 4 lanes and the traffic usually moves well. I was in the right lane, nobody behind me, and I picked up my phone at a red light and opened the app. I told myself I'd just check for a second. The footage started playing. The timestamp said 12:08 p.m. The living room looked normal, quiet. The camera angle was good. You could see the couch, the coffee table, the hallway, most of the front door. And then Marcus came in. I recognized the jacket he always wore, dark blue, worn at the elbows. He walked in and closed the door behind him. And then, he didn't go to the living room. He went straight to the hallway, turned toward the bedroom, and I watched him open our bedroom door and go inside. The light turned green. I didn't move. Someone behind me honked, and I barely heard it. I pulled forward without thinking, moving on autopilot. My eyes kept flicking down to the phone, even though I knew I shouldn't, even though I was driving, because I could not look away from what I was watching. He was in the bedroom for 4 minutes. I know because I kept watching the timestamp in the corner of the screen. 4 minutes and 20-some seconds. And when he came out, he was carrying something small, held in both hands, close to his chest so the camera couldn't get a clear angle on it. He went to the kitchen. He was out of the camera's view for almost a minute. Then he came back into the living room and sat down on the couch. And about 30 seconds later, Diane came out of the bedroom, moving slowly the way she does now, and she sat down across from him. And Marcus looked at her and said something. I couldn't hear the audio clearly. There was a lag, some static, but I could see his expression. And his expression was the thing that stopped my blood. He didn't look like a brother visiting his sick sister. He looked nervous, deliberately, carefully calm in the way that people look when they're trying not to show that they're nervous. His hands were resting on his knees. He kept glancing toward the hallway, toward the front door, like he was making sure of something. Diane's face was turned slightly away from the camera. I couldn't read her as clearly, but her posture was wrong. She was sitting too still. The way she sits when something hurts, but she doesn't want to say so. I pulled over. I didn't even decide to do it. My hands just did it. I was on the shoulder of the highway, hazard lights blinking, and I watched the rest of the footage with both hands holding the phone because I couldn't keep it steady otherwise. Marcus stood up from the couch and went to the kitchen again, came back with a glass of water, set it in front of Diane, said something else, and Diane reached out and took something from him, something small, something from his shirt pocket, and she looked at it for a moment, and then she looked up at him, and something passed between them, some understanding, some shared weight that made me feel like a stranger watching through a window of a life I thought was mine. I sat there on the shoulder of the highway for probably 2 minutes without moving. Then I called 911. I know how that sounds. I know some of you are probably thinking, why 911? Why not call Diane? Why not call Marcus? Why not drive home? Because what Marcus had taken from our bedroom, I had started to understand what it was. And because the something small that Diane had taken from his pocket, I had a terrible, forming thought about what that was too. And if I was right, I couldn't be the one to walk through that door alone. I wasn't thinking about confrontation. I was thinking about Diane, about what might be happening to her that she hadn't told me. My voice was steadier than I expected when someone answered. I explained what I'd seen. I explained my concerns. I told them about my wife's illness, her medications, the bedroom, what Marcus had been carrying. The dispatcher was calm and clear and told me to stay where I was. I sat on the shoulder of that highway for 45 minutes, and the whole time I kept going back to the footage, watching it again, looking for something I might have misread, looking for the explanation that would make it all make sense in a way that didn't hurt this much. I didn't find it. When I finally got home, there were two cars in the driveway that didn't belong to anyone I knew. Marcus's car was still there. I walked in through the front door, and the house was very full and very quiet at the same time. The way a room gets when something serious has already happened, and everyone is still absorbing it. Diane was on the couch. She looked small and pale and confused in a way that broke something in me, even then, even in the middle of everything. Marcus was standing near the hallway. He looked at me when I walked in, and his face did something complicated. Guilt, I thought. Or maybe just fear. Maybe both. I won't walk through every detail of what was said that afternoon. Some of it is still too raw. Some of it belongs only to our family. But I will tell you what Marcus had taken from our bedroom. It was Diane's medication, her prescription, one of the stronger ones, the one her doctor had been carefully adjusting for months. Marcus had been removing pills, not all of them, just enough that it was hard to notice at first. A few here, a week there. The count was off, but not dramatically, not in a way that screamed at you unless you were already looking. And the small thing from his pocket that he gave to Diane? A different pill, something he'd gotten somewhere else. He had been substituting her medication. He had been giving her something different without telling her, without telling me, without telling her doctor. Something he believed, genuinely, terrifyingly believed, would help her more than what her doctors had prescribed. He'd read about it somewhere. Some forum, some alternative medicine community he'd fallen into online in the months since her diagnosis. He was convinced the medical system wasn't doing enough. He was convinced he knew better. He was convinced he was saving his sister. He was not saving his sister. Her doctor confirmed later that week that the inconsistencies in her symptoms over the past 2 months, the sudden bad days that didn't match her treatment schedule, the strange spikes and drops, were consistent with her medication being altered. We had both attributed it to the illness, to its natural unpredictability. We had worried together about it, Diane and I, lying awake some nights wondering why some weeks were so much harder than others. Marcus had an answer for that. He just hadn't shared it with us. The aftermath of that week was, it's hard to describe. It moved in layers like most real things do. Diane was the one I thought about first. She needed to understand what had happened to her, and watching her understand it was one of the hardest things I've ever witnessed. She didn't get angry right away. She went quiet. The particular quiet that I've learned means she's processing something too large for immediate words. She sat with it for days before she cried, and when she finally did, it wasn't dramatic, just slow and tired and deeply sad. She loved her brother. She still loves him, I think, in that complicated way you love someone who has hurt you terribly while believing they were helping you. She kept saying, he thought he was helping. She kept saying it like a question she was asking herself, trying to figure out if it mattered, if it changed anything. I don't have an answer to that. I've thought about it every day since. Marcus cooperated. He didn't deny anything once it was in the open. He broke down fairly quickly, and the breakdown was genuinely distressed. Not the performance of someone caught, but the collapse of someone who had convinced themselves they were the hero of a story and suddenly had to see it differently. He kept saying Diane wasn't getting better fast enough. He kept saying he'd done research. He kept saying he'd been careful. He hadn't been careful enough. That's the thing about certainty. It always thinks it's being careful. Their older sister took Marcus's side at first. That was a painful few weeks. Family WhatsApp threads that I stopped reading. A call from their mother that left Diane more tired than any of her symptoms had that month. People who had not been in that house, who had not watched that footage, who had not sat on the shoulder of a highway trying to understand what they were seeing, had very clear opinions about who was right and who was wrong. Some of them still do. That's how families work. People pick corners and they stand in them. The question I got asked most often by the few people I told was, should you have installed the camera? I don't have a clean answer. The clean answer would be no. It was an invasion of privacy. It was a decision made from suspicion rather than communication. The right thing, perhaps, was to sit down with Marcus and ask him directly what he was doing. Ask Diane if something was wrong. Have the conversation like adults. Maybe. But I think about the weeks before I installed that camera, and I think about how many times I told myself I was imagining things. How many times I talked myself out of what I was feeling because I didn't want to be the kind of person who suspects his family. I think about how long it might have continued if I hadn't seen it. I think about Diane's medication, and I find that I can't regret it, even now. What I can do is hold it carefully, acknowledge what it says about where I was, how scared I was, how much I was carrying without realizing how heavy it had gotten. That was 8 months ago. Diane is doing better. Her doctor reworked her treatment plan after understanding what had been disrupted, and the last few months have been more stable than the whole previous year. She still has hard days. The illness hasn't gone anywhere, but the hard days make more sense now. They follow the pattern they're supposed to follow, and there is something surprisingly comforting about a pain you can predict. Marcus and Diane are not in contact right now. That's her choice, and I've respected it without pushing her in either direction. She said she needs time. I think time is the right word for what she needs, just a long, uninterrupted stretch of it. Our house is different, still quieter than it used to be, but differently quiet now. A quiet we've made ourselves instead of one that was made for us. Some evenings I come home and she's sitting by the window reading, and she'll look up when I walk in, and she'll smile. Not the big laugh I fell in love with, not yet, but something real. And I think, this is still our life. This is still something worth protecting. I still think about that afternoon on the highway shoulder, the hazard lights blinking, the phone in my shaking hands, the slow, horrible clarity of understanding something you'd been trying not to understand. I think about trust, how it isn't one thing. It isn't just believing that the people you love won't hurt you. It's also believing in your own perception. Believing that when something feels wrong, that feeling deserves to be taken seriously. I had spent months training myself not to trust what I was sensing, because trusting it meant conflict, meant pain, meant being the person who suspects their family. But the suspicion was right. The feeling was right. And I think I owe it to myself to remember that. Not as a reason to stop trusting people, but as a reason to stop talking myself out of what I know. If this story stayed with you, if it brought up something you've felt or lived through yourself, I gently ask you to like and subscribe. It's a small thing, but it lets these stories keep reaching people who might need them. Thank you for listening all the way to the end. It means more than you know.